Hello, today I'm going to show you how to start a new application in the Provider Management module for Vermont Medicaid. To get started, we're first going to click on the three lines on the top right-hand side of your screen. Under that, you're going to hover over Provider Enrollment and select New Enrollment. This is going to bring us to the welcome page of the application, and it's going to give you a little bit more information on what you may need for documentation as you go through your application. Things like your tax ID, your NPI, your license information. You want to have those items handy so it can be most efficient when you're filling out your application. If you want more specific information related to your enrollment type, your provider type, and specialty, you can fill out the pre-checklist listed here at the bottom and hit Generate Pre-Checklist. When you do that, it will give you more specific information on what you may need for your application. This is not a required step, it's just here to help you be prepared throughout your application. There's also a question here on whether or not you need to do a change of ownership. If you're actively enrolled with Vermont Medicaid and you are trying to change ownership on that active enrollment, there is a specific process for that. Today we are doing a new application which does not require a change of ownership, so I'm going to leave this as no for today. If you want more information on how to complete a change of ownership application, please visit our video on change of ownership. Once you're ready, you can click on Start on the right-hand side. The first thing that we're going to do is we are going to register our application. Every application that you enter within the Provider Management module must be registered in order to obtain an application tracking number, or an ATN. This application tracking number is unique to the application that you're working on and can be used to resume your application if you need to stop and start it again, or to check your enrollment status after you've submitted your application. So you'll need to complete an email address and a password, and you need to confirm both. There is a place for a provider reference. This isn't required. However, we have found that providers do find it helpful if they're filling out a lot of applications. The provider reference will present itself on each page of the application, so you can easily remember which doctor or which organization you're currently working on. So I'll enter in a provider reference today so that you can see what this looks like on the application. Once you've entered in the email address, password, and a provider reference, if applicable, you can click Register. Once the registration is complete, it will provide you with your tracking number, your ATN, and it will also send you an email to the email address you just registered with the application tracking number. So you don't necessarily need to save it here. It will be on each page of your application as you go through, as well as in that email that was just provided to you. So you can click OK. And a couple things I want to note before we get started here. Your application tracking number is at the top of the page, as well as that provider reference located right below the tracking number. If you need page level help, so if you need help on the specific page that you're working on, that can be found on the top right-hand corner with the green question mark. If you click on that, it will give you more information about your specific page that you're working on. There's also field level help, which is indicated here with a gray question mark. Above the field, you can hover over the gray question mark and it will give you more information about the field specifically. You do have the option to print each page as you complete them. It's here with this print preview. You can also print it at the end for your records if you would like on the last page of the application. Anything with a blue asterisk is required, and you will not be able to save and continue the page you're working on until all of that information has been completed. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to select our enrollment type, and we're going to do so by clicking the down arrow and selecting from the drop-down. If you want more information about enrollment types and the description of each, those can be found in our resources section on vtmedicaid.com. I'm going to be selecting a facility today. And you'll notice that a couple things happened once I selected that enrollment type. There was pages that populated behind this notification, and then I received a little information box letting me know that once I save this first page and continue on, I will not be able to change my enrollment type. The reason for this is the enrollment type and the provider type that you select drives the rest of the application. It's configured to be tailored to those two pieces of information, so you're not weeding through unnecessary information in your application. We're only going to be asking you for information that is pertinent to the enrollment type and provider type that you've selected. So once you've saved that first page and moved on, that's why you can't go back and change the enrollment type and provider type. If later on down the line you realize that you've selected the wrong enrollment type or provider type, you would need to cancel that enrollment and start over. I'm going to click OK to move on. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select my provider type by choosing from the drop-down. And today I am a DME provider, so I'm just going to type that in. And then you'll notice I got the same information box, also letting me know that I can't change my provider type once I move on. It also gave me a little bit more information because I did select a high-risk provider type. Moderate and high-risk provider types have additional screening requirements that may include background checks and fingerprints, so it's just letting me know that my application may be subject to those extra screening requirements. I will click OK to continue. And then I need to select an effective date. And I can select a date here up to 1 year in the past or up to 90 days in the future. So it just depends on what enrollment start date you are asking for. Under that, I need to complete the provider information. And this provider information may look different than your provider information. It depends on your specific enrollment type and provider type. So you may, if you're an individual provider type, you may be sending in your last name, your first name, and your social security number here. If you're an atypical provider, you won't be presented with the MPI field. It really just depends, but you will have a provider information section that you will need to complete. So I'm required to enter in my legal business name here. I can enter a tax name or a DBA if it applies, but it's not required. For all enrollment types except atypical, an MPI is going to be required. So you're going to want to make sure to enter in a 10-digit valid NPI. The system is configured to recognize that it needs to be 10 digits and it needs to be valid. So just make sure you're keying it in carefully, otherwise it will error out on you. I can move forward with this application using my tax ID or social security number, and I can toggle between the two. I'm going to use my tax ID today, and I'm going to fill out that information. And then under that, there will be a series of 4 questions. First is, are you currently enrolled as a provider? If I click yes here, it's going to give me a red warning box asking me if I'm actually here to revalidate. If you've received notification that it's time to revalidate, you're an actively enrolled provider in the Medicaid network. This is not the process to be able to do that. There is a specific revalidation process. So if you were to click yes here that you are trying to revalidate, it's going to take you out of this application and into that revalidation process. We are not here to revalidate today, so I'm going to click no, and you'll notice that it goes back to no as my option on my question. Next, it's going to ask if you were previously enrolled as a provider. If I check yes here, I'm going to be required to enter in my previous provider identifier, and that's going to be my 14-digit service location ID. There is a specific re-enrollment process that once I enter in that ID and fill out the rest of this first page and hit save and continue, it will then pull the information from my previous enrollment and present me with a pre-populated application to verify the information, update as needed, and submit. So if you need to re-enroll and you don't have your previous provider identifier, you can contact Gainwell Technologies Help Desk or VT Provider Enrollment email in order to obtain that. But again, we are doing a new enrollment today, so I'm going to change that back to no. We're going to ask you if you're Medicare enrolled, and if you check yes here, you'll notice that nothing populates to the right for you to complete, but later on in the application, you will be required to enter in your Medicare information. And then lastly, are you registered with CAQH? If I choose yes here, I will be required to enter in my CAQH provider ID. Just below that in the last section of this application is contact information. This is the name, address, and phone number of the individual that we would contact in relation to this application specifically. So if we have questions, if we need to return it, if there's any question about the application, who would you like us to contact? So I filled out the name and address of the individual, and you'll notice when I tab through the address, it's going to go through the USPS software to validate that address. It's going to present me with a validation here, and I can accept that validation by clicking directly on the line item. If for whatever reason you do not want to accept those changes that it's presenting to you, you can click the X and it will keep everything that you have keyed. I need to select my phone type as well as enter a phone number. And if you have an extension or a fax number that you want to enter, you can enter those here, but they're not required. Lastly, you'll notice that email address does not have an asterisk as being required. However, directly below that is your preferred communication method. And if you drop that box down, you have the option of either email or mail. We highly recommend that you choose email as your preferred communication method. If we're trying to contact you regarding your application, there are specific timeframes involved. For example, if we have to return your application for corrections, there's 30 days in order for that to be turned around, resubmitted to us before it locks out and you would have to start over. And if we have to do that by mail, of course, it's going to take longer. If your preferred communication method is email, as soon as we click the button to return it, you will have that email in your inbox. So I'm going to choose email as my preferred communication method today. And then you'll notice that now there is an asterisk next to the email address. I do need to fill that information out to move forward. So we've completed everything on the first page of the application. We're ready to hit save and continue. But before we do that, I just want to go back up to the top to reiterate. Double check the enrollment type and provider type that you've selected. Make sure those two pieces of information are accurate before you hit save and continue. Now will be the only time that you can change those. As soon as you hit save and continue, you won't be able to go back and change them. So just double check that information before moving on. Once you've validated all of the information that you've entered in all information with a blue asterisk, you are ready to hit save and continue and move on with your application.